So Better Call Saul, episode 3, Something Beautiful, has a fantastic opening sequence here. Seeing Gus's henchmen frame a drive-by scene. They literally do it to perfection, and it shows how meticulous Gus is and how much of a pro he is, that he doesn't let any possible cracks show. They literally drive over the spikes, shoot the car a bunch of times, put glass from the other car on the road, put the dead body of Nacho's partner in the front seat. They shoot his head right there so it's fresh, which was awesome. I love that. The sound of it exploding was great. And they actually shoot Nacho. Imagine being Nacho here, seeing your partner's dead body right next to you, and seeing his head splattered. Also knowing you're about to be shot, but not killed, but actually shot and just expecting insane amount of pain. And then he gets shot again in the field and has to make a phone call right away. And they're just like, do it quick before you pass out. So cruel. This shows how much work this business is and how much Gus had to think this out so no suspicion comes from Bolsa or anyone in the Salamanca party. And again, with this sequence, this desert feel in this Breaking Bad universe never gets old. It really is such a staple of the show, and this scene, again, I don't think you could have a better landscape for it. So Jimmy tells Mike at the diner about the Bavarian boy and proposes for Mike to steal this figure and make a swap with the other figure, and they split it 50-50, and that they clearly can make a buttload of money off of this. I was so happy to see these two together in a scene. I've been asking for this so much. We got a little bit of it in Better Call Saul, but the more the better. And I love how Mike can read literally right through Jimmy. And he's like, how did you come across this? Guys cross you in an office, done you wrong. It's actually rare to see Jimmy fail on a sell here, and he was selling hard to Mike, and it just didn't work. Mike is too smart for that. I mean, arguably in the whole Breaking Bad universe, Mike is the smartest person besides Walter White. And Jimmy uses a classic Saul type line where he's like, you see a 20 on the road, you don't pass it, you pick it up, it's free money. And Mike's just like, pass, not for me. And he interestingly says, I don't think this should be for you either. Very interesting. Mike's instincts are already telling him, this is not something you should be getting into, Jimmy. And he even asks about his brother passing away. So don't forget, Mike still has a soul here and a heart. And he already gets an inkling that this is setting Jimmy up to a bad road. So phenomenal scene here. So then the cousins find the drive-by scene with a bloody Nacho, and Nacho has to lie to them saying he doesn't know who did this to him. So Nacho's full-on now converting to Team Gus, and he's just went from one messy situation to another. So then we see Kim go back to Mesa Verde. We meet her new paralegal, Viola, and Kevin from Mesa Verde says, Kim, you have to see the models. And Kim is taken back by this huge plan for expansion. And when they're leaving the building, she gives the draft she originally told the paralegal in the beginning of the scene that she was going to write to the paralegal to write, showing she's not as in on this. So I like how this complicated Kim's character even more. So Jimmy meets with Dr. Caldora, played by the funny man Joe DeRosa. Remember, his character is the guy who finds sketchy jobs for people or finds someone to do a sketchy job for you. So Jimmy grabs the phone from him and shows him up by making a hell of a sale to Ira from Breaking Bad, who was the manager of Vamonos Pest. So this is a real deep cut for Breaking Bad fans. I had to pause the frame and try to figure out who this guy was. And in Breaking Bad, his company would go do pest control houses, but same time rob those houses. And he set up multiple fronts for Walter White. And Saul was a lawyer to many of these people working for Vamonos Pests. So Jimmy has a great line here. He's like, do you bleep gold? And he's like, well, you can get all this money for an easy job. This place has little to no security. Why not take it? So Ira agrees. We'll get back to that in a second. Because then it cuts to a scene where the cousins show up to Dr. Caldera with Nacho. This scene is straight from a horror movie, with Dr. Caldera attending to Nacho and putting a needle in his arm. It's really an awesome shot scene with the echo sound effect from Nacho's point of view of hearing it all in a daze, and the camera being blurry from Nacho's point of view, really putting you in that feeling of being Nacho at that moment. Almost feeling at that point, why not just kill me? And the doctor tells him he left a bullet in his shoulder and that metal detectors will go off if he walks through them. And he's like, if it starts to leak, we get a terrible infection and eventually die. So he advises to go see a doctor with imaging tech to make sure he wasn't hitting a spot that causes that type of infection. So it seems like the cousins don't really like that idea. And I don't know how much they're buying that these killers would just not shoot Nacho in the right spot and make sure he was killed. So something's definitely up there. So then we see Ira break into the copier's office, and he goes to grab the Bavarian boy. And of course, the boss from the last episode we see is sleeping in the office. The one thing Jimmy did not consider. This was a suspenseful scene, and it had a lot of humor to it, but it was so dragged out. But the humor that was really good was The boss argues with his wife about a vacuum, and that's the reason he's sleeping in the office. And I love when he orders delivery and then Ira's reaction on her desk, like, come on. But Jimmy comes to bail him out and eventually sends the boss's car down the parking lot to get him out. But again, I'm summing this sequence up really quickly, but that sequence was long. And I get it's showing exactly what happened here, and there's not many ways you could do it otherwise, but it just wasn't the most compelling stuff. So Bolsa calls Gus, informing him about the attack on Salamanca's men, and Gus knows he's in the clear now because there's really no suspicion from Bolsa on Gus. And Bolsa wants to cut a deal with a local supplier because he knows they're close to being dry. Gus tells him Eladio always says this is forbidden. Bolsa still wants it done. So the mastermind Gus, we'll see what his next chess move is here, but he's clearly got a long-term plan in how to deal with Bolsa and how we get to the events in Breaking Bad. But then we get one of the best cameos to date in Better Call Saul, where Gus goes to the chemistry lab and there he sees Gale. Gale, being one of my favorite characters in Breaking Bad, this was a huge shock to me and I was super excited about it. And it was just classic Gale for him to be singing that Element song with headphones on. And it turns out he tested samples of meth for Gus. And he has an interesting line where he says to Gus, tell your chemist to check his cookware because it could be inducing contamination. This is odd, and I wonder what Gus is plotting, that he might actually like hearing that. But then Gale tells him, hey, these samples aren't good. They're actually pretty bad. And saying he can do much better. And this is showing how much he always did want to be Gus's main cook and main guy here. And Gus is like, I can't allow it. Not yet. You were meant for better things. This shows me too, Gus actually does like Gale as a man, and he would only clearly bring him on if it was absolutely necessary, like he does in Breaking Bad. And honestly, I love scenes like this with Gus because it shows you this guy is still so hard to read. He literally puts on this complete fake persona. There is this crazy man down below, but there's also a man who still cares about things and some good. And he clearly does care about Gale. I mean, Gale is the most likable guy. He's just a nerd who loves his craft. And then back at Jimmy in Kim's place, Kim's reading the draft the paralegal wrote, and she's like, yeah, doesn't really care about it. So she's already showing this change in tone towards the whole Mesa Verde account. So that's something to keep an eye on with her. And then we get a big scene where basically Kim's now filling Jimmy in on everything she learned from Hanlon. Jimmy learns he's only getting $5,000 from the will, and he's like, well, that will pay off my MasterCard. And she knows it's a big moment because she's about to give Jimmy Chuck's letter, and he's so casual about it. And he's even like, I'll read it in front of you, because she's like, you can read alone, it's a personal thing. He's like, nah, we'll read together. And the letter doesn't have a specific date on it, which I thought was interesting. When did Chuck exactly write this? Is this just to show good face here that he always kind of had planned? And he says kind of generic things, but they're nice. And he's like, I'm happy you brought joy to Mom, which he was always jealous of, and he's respect what he's become the past few years. Proud they share the name McGill. Hope you remember not only as a brother, but a man who was always in your corner, which is total BS and not true, and Jimmy knows that. And I wonder how much of this letter Jimmy actually believes is BS, and how much we as the audience believe is BS, or did Chuck actually have some kind of change of heart, which I don't think at all. But Kim clearly does, and she's tearing up. This shows Kim is really the most human person here, and how cold Jimmy kind of has gotten, or how smart Jimmy's gotten just reading BS in people, and that he chooses to stick with that and not just maybe comfort his own struggles and Chuck's death with just, hey, maybe my brother did love me and I can accept that and hope that's what really is true and look for the good, which Kim always does. But Jimmy's like, nah, he's a piece of crap. He just doesn't care. But even if Kim wanted to think that way and believes that way somewhere deep down, she's just too good to think that, too optimistic. She's not made for that. And I love the line where Jimmy's like, man could write a letter. Like, that's all he's taken from it. He sees right through it. Kim's super emotional, goes into her room. It was an odd way to end the episode, I thought. I didn't think it was that effective with the credits appearing right after that. I didn't think that was, like, much of a crazy revealing moment or something that would leave you like, ooh. It was kind of just like, okay, it's kind of what we expected. I thought this was the weakest episode of the season so far. That's not saying much, though, because the first two were excellent. My biggest complaint was that robbery scene. It just was way too long. And a lot of montage here. Even though it was cool, the horror scene with Nacho, it's still having that in the same episode as that long, drawn-out robbery. There's a lot of just kind of blandness and stale. But having said that, the season as a whole, this is the most interesting storylines for all three of these stories to date for me. It's had me the most excited. I can't wait for what's to come. I really love seeing Gale. That was a highlight here. So I'm giving this episode a solid 8.2. Still great. It's still from the masterminds of Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould. So I always trust the show. And again, with this universe, I'm nitpicking a lot. I expect amazing things from him, that's why. And I always trust him. These guys have never had moments where you roll your eyes or feel like the show's jumping the shark. They're always true about the art and craft, and I hope they never lose that. And that's why I respect it so much. So Let me know what you thought of this episode down below. Please subscribe. My reviews of Better Call Saul get dropped right after the episode airs, so you don't want to miss one. I also have reviews for a bunch of other TV shows. And the exciting thing is, if you haven't heard it yet, check out my recent interview I did with the man himself, Patrick Fabian, aka Howard Hamlin. You can see that right here. He goes into detail about his character this season, stuff behind the scenes we've never heard before, and hints at some future stuff. So you want to check that out, and please follow me at SteveVarley1 for more on Twitter and Instagram. And I'll see you next time.